Hi, welcome to Agile Encounters. Today's topic is how to start with design sprint. My guest is Marcin Chyła, the product coach that is really experienced in the topic of the design sprint. And here is what we're going to cover. First of all, there is a lot of confusion about the difference between design sprint and design thinking, and we want to cover that topic at the very beginning. That is an enabler for the second part, which is what is the design sprint and what are typical real life scenarios where you can apply it. Then something that a lot of you is curious about, so typical pitfalls while applying design sprint in real life. And finally, I'd like to connect some dots between the design sprint and in general discovery kind of work, learning, and agile ways of working that are typically connected to delivery. So stay tuned. We have a lot to cover. Marcin, let's start with the basics. What's the design sprint? What's the
All
design
right.
thinking? Is that the same or not? How do you see it?
All right. Good evening. All right. When I think about design sprint, in fact, I'm thinking about design thinking. Please remember, design thinking, it's a philosophy, it's a way of working. So, if you would like to start with design sprint, start from design thinking. Understand the design thinking because design sprint, it's a framework. Design
Mhm.
thinking, it's a philosophy. That's my theory. Let's talk about that.
All right. Would it be fair if I say it's like with Agile and Scrum? Scrum is a framework that implements Agile, that is more like a mindset approach in general. Does it resonate with you?
That's it. That's it. That's it, Pavel. Yeah.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
So, would you recommend starting with a design sprint or design thinking? Which one would you recommend newbies to start with?
I would like to start from design thinking. Can you show me the slides about the design thinking, please?
Absolutely. Here we go.
All right. So look, there are 5 stages before we go to the stages. Design thinking, it's a customer or people person centric design. So no surprise. First stage is about it's empathize. So get to know your customer better. So there are lots of tools that helps you to understand your customer, your your user, and so on and so on. After that, there is a define stage. So when you talk with these people, when you understand their problems, pains, gains, jobs to be done, and so on, it's time to connect dots, define the problems behind what they told you on the interviews. When you have that, when you understand that when you understand these problems, these challenges these people have, it's time to find a solution. It's time to think how to solve these problems. Then that's my favorite stage because it's time for build a prototype, something really temporary, something cheap that helps you to test if that solution works or not. And then it's time to make a test with real people, and these real people will give you a real feedback if that solution that you ideated on the third stage is good or not. Are they going to buy it? Are they believe that problem will be solved in that tool? In general, that's the design thinking approach.
hmm that resonates with me. However, have a tiny caveat over here. I know. Correct me if I'm wrong, but with Agile we are pretty strict. There's one Agile manifesto.
Mhm.
Everybody knows the values and the principles. How about design thinking? Is there one design thinking or different flavors of design thinking as an approach?
Yeah, that's the problem I have with design thinking because it's a philosophy, it's a way of working, and not a framework. Maybe I'm a person that like frameworks. I like Scrum. I like design. I like frameworks because there are rules. there are concrete exercises to do, there are artifacts, and so on and so on. That's why I had a problem with design thinking. I didn't know how to start. When I'm thinking about empathize stage, there are a number of tools that you can use. There are a number of tools that you can use on the define stage, and so on and so on and so on. I need a clear guidance. I need a clear framework. That's why I like design sprint.
Not everybody knows, but I personally had a tiny experience as a UX professional. I graduated school on UX, so we talk a lot about design thinking. And what hit me was that depending on the teacher, it was completely different. Maybe not complete, but very different design thinking. Apparently, there are many approaches. Stanford University, these schools, so design school of them, they have their own design thinking. A very famous IDEO company, their own approach. We heard Google had their own, and so on and so on. What is unique, I think, to what is common to all of them is they talk about stages, right? But I believe this process is not linear. It's not a waterfall within discovery that you start here, continue here. Am I right?
Yes, you're completely right. Look, at the ideation stage, you may think, do we really understood our user correctly? Let's back to the ideation. Let's back to the empathy stage. Yes, of course, there are loops. Of course, at the end of the process, when you conduct a five or couple of tests with the real users, you may be informed that, hey, the challenge is good, but the solution is weak, or the solution is good, but the prototype was not so. Yeah, of course, there are loops. There should be a loops. This is not a one way, and that's correct. That's the common for design thinking and design sprint as well.
So, shall we take a look at what design sprint is about?
Yeah, let's yeah, before we jump to the slide. All right, I spoke with my colleague, and don't worry. I spoke with my colleague a couple of weeks ago. We spoke about the design thinking and design sprint, the same as we today, and that's interesting. But he had exactly the same problem. He didn't know how to start. He understood the design thinking correctly, but he didn't know how to start. And I told him, hey, there's a book. That book calls Sprint. That book was written by Jay Knapp from Google Venture, and in that book you will find clear guidance. You will find a clear framework how to make a design thinking, because design sprint is a 5 or 4 days framework which based on the design thinking. So look at the first day. Usually it's a Monday, and in design thinking this is a moment when you should understand your customer. Design thinking here, design sprint on Monday says, hey, understand the problem, make a map, take your team and build a common understanding about the problem, about the challenge. Yes, of course, this is a space to talk about the customer. This is a space to talk about researchers. This is a space to talk about the market. But in general, first day is to build a map. In general, to build a common understanding in your team. And at the end of that day, you must decide which element of that map is the most tricky, is the most risky, and it's worth, which element is really worth to think about the solution, to prototype that solution, and then make a test about that solution. So that's the first day. This is a Monday. After that, when you understand the problem, when you choose the sprint goal, it's time to sketch some solutions. So here we are on the ideation phase. This is an ideation phase in the design thinking approach. So that's the time to sketch some solutions. So if we have a team, we have a sprint team, there are 6 or 7 people. So we have 6 or 7 different sketches, a different 6 or 7 different ideas how to solve the problem that we discovered a day before. Next day, I decide on Wednesday we need to combine these 6 or 7 ideas, merge it, or pick the best proposal, the best solution. Then Thursday, Thursday is dedicated to build a prototype. So we have, let's say, 8 hours to build a good, cheap prototype that will be used on Friday. And on Friday, it's a time to make exactly 5 user tests with real users. And after these 5 tests, we need to make a decision what's next. If our solution is good enough to think about some development, or we should make a step back and think again about solution, or maybe think about the prototype, or maybe think about the sprint goal, or maybe think about the challenge, or maybe decide, hey, this is not the way to go, and that's also valuable because we will save a lot of money, man, really.
That sounds really terrific. And to me, one of the biggest advantages of design sprint framework is not only that it helps you understand design thinking, you're overwhelmed with design thinking. Here you have frames, you have strict frames, but it also helps you focus. It's a very focused workshop, up to 5 days. I can imagine empathize phase stage that takes many days, many weeks even, because you identify who you want to recruit into for interviews, for instance. You start the recruitment, it may take itself few weeks, then having the interviews, analyzing data, concluding it could be a longer project. Design sprint literally is a sprint, and it takes not a lot of time. I
Correct,
wonder
Pavel.
about
This
some.
it
Mhm.
calls Pavel, it calls a sprint. This is not a marathon. These five
Absolutely.
days are super intensive. I, as a facilitator, sometimes I'm tired like a dog, really like a dog, because these 5 days are super intensive. People are also really focused on the goal because we have only 5 days. But at the same time, it's worth to mention that people that we invited for a sprint, they must have a full focus on the challenge we are playing, because we have to have a clear calendar, no computers, no mobile phones. We need to be focused on that challenge, on that sprint goal. So cons and pros.
I hear you totally. That reminds me, for instance, Kaizen events, typical lean management. They only work if everybody's fully focused,
Yeah.
completely isolated from the rest of the world, especially business world, for the time being. I have a few questions when I
Yes,
look
please.
at this design sprint. Which stage, which day, in that case, of the design sprint, as a facilitator of it, do you find the most challenging? And why?
The most challenging, in my opinion, is a third day. First,
Hmm.
it's a third day, so we are a little bit tired. And we have 4 or 5 ideas, and we have to merge it. We must take some kind of cherry picking. We must pick the best
Hmm.
elements from these all sketches, all these ideas. We must detect uh, the smartest elements and merge it into the one final solution. That's challenging, but that's super happy moment, because from one perspective, because all these people feel like an authors of the final solution. That's super cool that not the only one person is a real winner, that he or she won, and her or his solution was taken into consideration as a final solution. We are picking the best elements from these 6 or 5 sketches. We are merging that, and we are thinking, all right, if this is the final solution, how will our final user, how that user will use that solution? That's why we are using storyboard tool. It comes from cinema, and we are using storyboards to imagine what will be the interaction of our user and that new solution. That's challenging, but that's super intensive, super happy moment in the sprint.
Speaking of people, I believe depending on the product, on the situation, slightly different different audience or different participants are invited. But is there any rule of thumb telling you who are the welcome participants of design sprint versus who perhaps shouldn't be invited because wouldn't bring much to the table?
Good question. I would say we need different roles here. We need the people who are really involved in that challenge, in that domain. But we need, for instance, we need engineers to make some doable tests. We need someone from business that will take care about the value. We need the people from design, from one perspective, to still have a focus on the customer need and interaction with the customer. At the same time, usually these people helping us to build a prototype. It's good to have someone from marketing or from sales. One more super important thing, we need to have a person who will make a final decision about the solution. So yeah, usually it's a product manager. Sometimes we may invite our CEO or CTO, but we need a strong position to make a final, sometimes tough decisions, because it's a sprint. We must run. We cannot stop. So we need such a person on the team.
Is it a good idea to invite the customer for such a sprint?
No. I would like to. The problem is that the customer may have a desire to address his or her own problems, and we need to think about the persona. We need to think about our market. We need to think a bit wider than a customer. So yes, we need a customers at the end of the process. During the Friday, we need to invite some customers, and they will help us to validate if our solution it's a good solution. It's a valuable solution. We may also consider to invite one customer as an expert, and a time for interviews with experts is during the first day. Because in our sprint team we have super gifted people, but we have no all knowledge that
Absolutely.
exists. So sometimes we may invite some external person as an expert, and that might be a customer, but usually there are other specialists in the company that couldn't join to the sprint team. That's my approach. That's my experience. Yeah.
Got it. I have not so broad experience, but still some experience with design sprint framework, and I anticipated your answer. I was sure that you wouldn't in the first round invite the customers, but I thought for a different reason. In my experience, the reason is customers are typically, especially external customers, typically very passionate about their opinions. And quite often, I'm not sure if it also used to be your case, they tend to arrive with solutions and not problem statements, while design sprint is about creative thinking about what could be the solution. If you arrive with solutions, the whole creative process doesn't make sense. That's why I avoid involving into the sprint. However, I do agree. We need our input up front and some decisions at the end. That's good practice.
Correct. Correct.
Mhm. Some of you, some of people watching us right now, you might be afraid of the fourth day. So Thursday over here, build a realistic prototype. What does it mean a realistic prototype? If we are planning to design and deliver the mobile application, does it mean we are actually building an application over here?
Not at all. We have no time for that. We have only
Mm-hmm.
one day. So in fact, it's probably 6.5 hours to create a prototype. So, fake it. We must fake it. We must fake it. So there are a number of tools that helps us to prototype uh, some 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 fake applications like Figma, like UXPin, like Sketch. Yeah, in general, there are lots of prototyping tools, and you may pretend that you just build a application or website. If you need more ideas how to make a prototype, look at the book I just mentioned. If you could show us the book, it's a uh, blue and yellow. Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Over
Please
here.
find that. Find. I like that book very much, and the chapter about the prototype is my my favorite. There are a lot of super interesting examples how to build a prototype. There is a example about uh, 3D prints, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you may print the prototype. You may print if you have no product yet. You may prepare a brochure about that
Mm-hmm.
tool, that product, and explain on the brochure what it's all about. And you can take that brochure to the customers, to the potential buyers, and talk with them about that product. So you will find a number of inspiring ideas how to make a cheap prototype. That must be cheap, because at the end of the process you will get you may know that, hey, this is not the way to go, and it's really okay to throw it into the bin, really, because that should be cheap.
Mm-hmm. Actually, we started with a conclusion that design thinking is so broad. We need some frames to start with, and design sprint provides the frames.
That's my
But
approach. That's my approach.
yeah, when I look at the 5 days over here, I can imagine dozens of techniques that could be used on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday.
Yeah.
Does design sprint provide prescribe any more formal frames, like a list of techniques that you could use at each of the stages?
Yeah, exactly. And that's, from my perspective, that's the power of design sprint. Because when I think about the first phase of design thinking, I see a lot of different tools. How can I meet my customers' problem? We can organize interviews. I may look at them from the camera. We can, yeah. There are lots of tools how to empathize with our customers. But during the design sprint, you will get super strict instructions what to do. Create 5 sketches or 8 sketches. You have 15 minutes to take your votes on some element. Think about the problems as opportunities. I'm thinking about how might we tool. There are lots of clear instructions what to do. That's how I like design sprint.
Sounds really interesting. What else? What else can you share about the design sprint, especially its real life applications? Where would you use it? Where you wouldn't use it? Maybe.
I would say design sprint as a 5 days process. It's dedicated for big challenges because it's worth. You must find a challenge that is worth to dedicate 5 days. So your
I see.
challenge cannot be fluffy because
Mm.
hey, it's in fact it's expensive process. 6 or 7 people will spend probably 6 or 7 hours in the same place together and thinking about the problem. So it's worth to have a challenge that is worth to be solved in that
Uh-huh.
way. Yeah.
So let's clarify it immediately. Does it mean that if you have a project with the aim to deliver a product, you would
Yeah.
run just one design sprint, or actually you can have a series of them?
That might be a series of design sprint, but in general, in design sprint, you should address the most risky, the most tricky element of the
I see.
project. That's the clue. That's the clue. Because at the end of the first day, you have to pick the sprint goal. And that should be, imagine you are a startupper. You know your customer, you know what kind of problem that person have, and probably you believe you have a solution for that person, but you also you're aware that there are some risks around that solution, and that's the clue. Pick that the most crucial, the most risky, the most tricky challenge around your solution and test it in the 4 or 5 days during the design sprint.
All right, sounds terrific. There is a lot behind the creative process. You mentioned that typically are very tired after these 5 days. I can only imagine. The process. I think it's common both this design sprint in particular, design thinking in general, or UX the design in general. There's a lot of divergent and convergent thinking parts. So a lot of brainstorming on one side, on the other side. Somebody has to prioritize or make the choice. Does it all happen together by the entire team, or there are some specific roles within the design sprint? You make the decisions. You're a creative person only.
Yeah, in general, there are three roles in design sprint framework. First role is a designer, so that person that will first. Usually, it's an originator of that process. Very often, it's a product manager or CTO, CEO, the person that have a power has a deep understanding of the problem. So we need such a strong person on the board. We need a facilitator, so a person who knows the process very well and helps team go through that process for the next couple of days. That how I mentioned, it's good to invite someone who will be responsible for building a prototype, and it's good to join that person at the very beginning of the process, because that person will build a deep understanding about the problem we are fighting for it, and it's easier for that person to build a prototype. And we have a team with different people, different roles in the team with a different knowledge and different skills. That's the way.
All right. I know you have prepared one more slide, and I wonder if that's the moment we should take a look at it.
Yeah, because because very often when we're talking about the design thinking, we are
Mhm.
talking about double diamond approach.
Yeah.
And when I think about the design sprint, I see diamonds as well. So look at the first diamond.
Mm.
During the first day, we have to collect, we have to discover a lots of insight from the market, from the persona, from the researches we did, and so on and so on. But at the end of Monday, we need to pick a sprint goal. So that's the most tricky, the most risky element. Then next diamond, we will create a couple of sketches, so a couple of potential solutions. But at the end of the next day, at the end of the Wednesday, we will decide which is the best, or we will in fact merge these solutions into the one final solution. And even I see a next third small diamond, because we will get a feedback from 5 users, but at the end of the day, we need to learn, we need to make a final decision, what just we did, what just we hear from the our testers, from our customers, users, and we need to make some decision. Hey, what's next? So I see not double diamond, I see triple diamond.
Very precious approach, apparently.
Yeah.
All right. I think it's about time to move on a bit. I wonder, based on your experience, what are the typical pitfalls related to design sprint application of design sprint in different situations?
Yeah. Uh, you have to prepare people. You have to prepare people and they calendars. I mentioned on the very beginning, you need
Mm-hmm.
these people focus on the sprint, on the goal for the next couple of days. So you have to, they have to have empty calendars, and they need to be ready to work hard for the next couple of days. And in the corporate world, that might be challenging. You know, find a 4 or 5 empty days in the calendar. That's super challenging. Next pitfall might be, I mentioned about that. You need to have a different people, different roles, different skills in the team. I must confess that my first design sprint I did with my own team. So I had mainly developers in my team. Of course, I had a UX designer and one more person, but most of my members of my first design sprint were engineers, and you know they
Mm-hmm.
were brilliant guys. They had fantastic ideas, but these ideas were super engineering focused.
Noted.
That's the problem. Mm,
So it sounds it's not a showstopper, but we may have some one side kind of thinking without different diversity. I totally
yeah,
hear you.
yeah,
Any
yeah.
other typical pitfalls? Hmm.
Uh, Remember, you have only one day to create a prototype, so you
Hmm.
must pick a smart approach. You must pick the smart tool, and you must pick the scope wisely, because it's only one day. Sorry, no bonus. Next day you have to make a test. And yeah, that's my top three. That's my top three.
Got it. Regarding the first one only, I very often try before many days before the design sprint, try
Yeah,
to look after what I call the sponsorship. I need a sponsor who will release these people for full 1 week, tell them you should be here, this is important, I'm paying for it. Not only a leader that says, yeah, it's a good idea, but a leader that's a sponsor. It doesn't mean that you need a budget, specific budget allocated, or a project for 1 week or 5 days created.
yeah.
But if there's a stakeholder powerful enough to make such a decision, less as a leader, more as a sponsor, the odds of having everybody on board full time, I really increase.
Yeah, correct. Historically, design sprint was created for startups, so for small group of people with a big autonomy, I would say. So that was easier to make a decision. Okay, this week we are 100%, 150% focus on that challenge. In the big organization, yes, definitely you need a sponsor who will make a decision. Hey, you, and you. That's your goal. Focus
Fair
on
enough.
that for the next couple of days.
Fair enough. All right. Moving to the last topic that we prepared today. So, how design sprint works with agile ways of working. I will start with a disclaimer. Quite often, I see people thinking when design sprint is Scrum because in Scrum we have sprints. I believe it's a total coincidence that in design sprint name we have the word sprint, which typically is connected as at least in IT with Scrum. So no,
Yeah.
design sprint is not part of the Scrum framework. They're completely two
Not at
different
all.
stories.
Not at all.
Uh,
Not at all. From my perspective, design sprint it's earlier because from design, from my perspective, design sprint it's a one possible tool of product discovery, for instance. In the team we have people from engineering, we have people from UX, we have people from product, from sales, from marketing. These people are ready to discover, to address the most popular products risk about the
mm,
usability, about the viability, and so on and so on. For me, design sprint, it's more about discovering, about the hypothesis verification, not about the development. And that sprint from Scrum ORG, it's about development. And sorry, nothing common.
well, if we go into details, I would say there is some place in a Scrum sprint for what we call product backlog refinement. Would I invest full 5 days of a 1 week long Scrum sprint for discovery? No, I can't because the idea behind Scrum sprint, so I'm going to use Scrum over
Behind.
here, sprint,
Yeah.
is we need to have increment. It could be really, really little, but there's a deliverable over there. On the other side, if my sprint is 2, 3, 4 weeks long, and I need, because that's the current need, to invest some significant time for discovery, it's absolutely allowed in Scrum. And technically, I can imagine that in a sprint of 3 weeks, the first 1 week is the design sprint framework used for discovery, and then we carry on. But with a disclaimer, I wouldn't do it every sprint, every Scrum sprint. Absolutely. Perhaps every now and then only.
I like your approach that 3 weeks sprint may contain a sprint on the very beginning. And I like your approach that we cannot start each sprint from sprint, as you said.
It would be legal, but absolutely, I think it wouldn't make much sense to have design sprint
That will be
every
legal
Scrum
and that
sprint
will
at all.
be super challenging for these people. I
Absolutely.
heard I heard some cases from Lego that they try to make a sprint after sprint after sprint, but that it's not a popular approach.
There is a concept of rapid prototyping, right? That you can embed in whatever framework you have. But I wouldn't do rapid prototyping with design sprint. This is too heavy tool, in my opinion. Indeed, fair enough. So design sprint is not part of Scrum. If you're facing any exam, Scrum Alliance, Scrum.org related exam, please pay attention. There's no design sprint in Scrum. If there's a question, what do you do in the first sprint in Scrum? It's not a design sprint at all.
Not at
I
all.
have to I have to say there is a trend that I observe nowadays to include more and more of discovery kind of work into Scrum, because hey, why not? If my cross-functional Scrum team, multidisciplinary Scrum team has, let's say, programmers and testers, why not also designers? In that case, we not only code, test, but also design within sprint. Still, design sprint as a framework is pretty heavy tool, time consuming, as you said, and that tool should be used wisely. Fair enough. I'd like us to finish with a tip from you. If it's a good idea to start working with design thinking from design sprint, how should we start working with design sprint? I'm going to show the book again over here. Is it a good idea to read the book and then start the deliver design sprint, or you would have other proposal for newbies?
That's my case. I read the book, and it's not super big book. It's easy to read. It's super practical book, because at the end of that book you will find the checklists. So there is a list what you must prepare, from stickers, from pens and timers, and at the same time you will find the checklist. What should you do day after day, exercise after exercise? It's super practical book. I like that book. I read that book at least 3 times. I like it a lot. Jake did super valuable work. So yeah, if you think how to start design sprint, start from that book. You may also visit YouTube, find a Google Venture channel. You will find the movies there that Jake and John recorded. You will understand more, but in general, that's the starting point. that was my way, and I can recommend it. Yeah.
All right. Many people may have a question. Do I need to be a designer to facilitate design sprint, or can I be a complete stranger after reading the book, of course?
I'm not a designer. I'm a product person. I mentioned that book is super practical. With this checklist at the end of the book, you will really understand what should be done during each day of design sprints. Don't worry about it. You have to think. You have to have a basic facilitation skills. You don't have to be product manager or UX designer or whatever. Yeah, don't worry about it.
And a final question of mine that actually is linked to something I want to mention at the end. What is the most unusual application of design sprint that you experienced? Industry or kind of product, or maybe completely different situation?
I must confess that my cases are mainly about websites and mobile application around e-commerce, but from in the book there is a case of robot that was created to support guests in hotels. That case is super interesting. And that book was written in the 2016. So that's the case from probably 2014 or 15. That's super interesting case. A robot. In the third in the third chapter, you will get information about that.
So it's not only software, apparently also
not
hardware.
Not only software, not at all. Yeah. From that book, you will find another out of IT cases for sure. Read that book. It's worth.
One case that I will have, but I cannot share it right now because it's future case in a month from now. We are planning to use the design sprint framework to help our customer design product organization. So actually, we are using the same concept, not to design a new product or service, but organization that will later work with products. How it whether it's a good idea or bad, I will tell you in about 6 weeks from now. All right.
I feel that's the good approach. Hey, you have a space to talk about to talk with experts. You have a space to visualize the current state. There is a space to create another ideas, merge these ideas, create something testable, and then make a test. Hey, good approach.
Seems legit. Absolutely legit. Thank you very
Yeah.
much. All right. Thank you, Marcin. Marcin
Thank you.
product coach was my guest. This is the last Agile Encounter in the current year. We wish you all Merry Christmas and soon 2024. Take care. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me here, and Merry Christmas. Thank you so much. Thanks, Paweł.